Hey, welcome in. I am back today with another commentary. This one is going to be for Andro Dunos. So, this recording is going to be bigger, longer, more horribibler than ever before. Nah, I kid. It may be bad, but I don't know how bad. Not yet, at least. So, we are going to be covering this game today. We may ramble incoherently in the background. I have no idea. We are just going to go and play it by ear, so let's go ahead and get into it. So, I actually like this game a fair bit. I got it as a part of a box of cartridges, and I never played it before. I had never seen it at an arcade or anything. Like, it was kind of like this sleeper hit, I think, that kind of crept up on me. I went ahead, I plugged it into the dongle and stuff, got the ROM ripped, and I found that I was enjoying it a little bit too much. So I love the classic side-scrolling shmups and stuff. I don't really like the vertical shmups that much. I mean, they're gorgeous to look at and stuff, but I just don't really like them that much in terms of playability and stuff. For some reason, side-scrollers have always been more my jam. So it was really refreshing to finally see like a side-scroller come out of this cartridge package, essentially. I didn't really see too many of them, in all honesty. So with Andro Dunos, it was a very pleasant, very welcome surprise. And it really, I think it's like one of those kind of, it's not really silly. It tries to take itself seriously, but it comes off as kind of cartoony, especially the design of the ship and stuff. So I noticed that SNK kind of went through this oddball phase. I think a lot of arcade companies went through this phase back then where they didn't really quite know what to make. Like, they didn't know what to develop and what not to develop, and SNK really just was not, they were not immune from this in any regard. So SNK produced a variety of games. They had tons of arcades all over the place. They had shoot-'em-ups, they had trivia games, they had sports games, they had really goofy kind of long-form RPG hack-and-slash games that you could go and play and stuff that were often able to eat up like 2 hours of your time without you really noticing. You know, they were spread really, really thin, and I noticed a lot of arcade companies back then were kind of doing this, and I think that it was in response to the home console market. Like, I noticed when the home console market finally started to rebound, when Nintendo had gotten up after that gaming crash that we had, you know, Nintendo was going and sitting there saying, okay, we're going to have a wide variety of games, and we're going to go ahead and bring gaming home, essentially. And so I noticed around this time, a lot of arcade companies were like, we need to have a wide variety, and it was just really kind of strange because I noticed they would go and they would make sports games, they would go and make trivia games, they would go and have just this huge wealth of stuff to play, and while that's great, when you go and have like a home console and stuff, because they can just go buy the cartridge and take it home, I don't really think it was a very solid, idea for the arcade market, because with arcades and stuff, all of your viability is wrapped up around what's popular and what's not. And so I noticed SNK went through various phases. You know, when they first, before they got like their Metal Slug streak and stuff going, SNK went through various phases where they would go through and make sports games, and they would have the trivia games, and, you know, like, to be honest with you, none of them were ever really fun. Like, they had like a wide wealth of games and stuff, but I don't really think that they were really amusing, and they didn't really have like a lot of staying power. And so SNK kind of went through various art periods as well. Like, it used to be with a lot of their older games, the art was very clean, but it was the theming of it was very simple. It was like, oh, you know, just either a military theme or basic city theme, as we would see with like a lot of their beat-em-ups and stuff. But I kind of noticed from Andro Dunos forward that they were kind of squeezing in this 1990s inspired science fiction theme going on, and I would constantly see this theme with a lot of their later games and stuff. Like, I would watch SNK slowly but surely start to retire a lot of their sports titles and lean more towards the incarnation that they have now, which is primarily fighting games, beat 'em ups, and side-scrolling shoot-'em-ups. And so it was like really interesting because with Andro Dunos, it's kind of like the start of this. Like the game kind of starts off and it looks relatively normal, and then as well as like other titles that they have, it slowly kind of progresses into this hardcore kind of cheesy body horror-esque science fiction kind of aesthetic that they were kind of going and pushing for, and I actually really like it. I really, really adore that aesthetic. Like, I love science fiction in general, and I love body horror in general. I felt that Japan had always done body horror really well, given their history with it and stuff. It was definitely, while not a uniquely Japanese thing, I feel that Japan did it the best. And so watching SNK go and incorporate a lot of these themes into their games and stuff was actually really, really nice. And so that's one of the reasons why I actually like this game as much as I do. Because it kind of just screams 90s, because that's what we had going on in the 90s. It was like a lot of body horror and a lot of science fiction, and you know, cyberpunk was experiencing another resurgence and stuff. Like when you go and you think 90s and early 2000s, this is what you typically think of, you know. So in many ways I think Andro Dunos is kind of like peak aesthetic in that regard for what the period was, and I really just enjoy what it brings to the table. I feel that this game has a lot to offer. The contrast on it is really, really good. You know, like, I don't ever really feel like my shots blend in with the background and stuff. Enemies kind of blend in every now and then, and I do still die a fair bit, but I feel like it's still a really solid title that is really easy to play because all of the colors pop. It has a very, very diverse color palette, and it makes it a lot easier to play as an end result. And so the problem that I had with recording this game, it recorded really well, believe it or not. The problem that I had with it is after the recording was done, I couldn't stop playing it. A lot of people are literally going to go, well, that's how you know the game is good. I agree. But at the same time, I do have to go and do the video at some point. Like, I can't just sit down and be like, hey, we're going to keep playing this up until my thumbs fall off. It doesn't really work. That's not how that is. So the thing with Andro Dunos is it doesn't feel like too much. It doesn't feel like it's too little. It actually feels like it has pretty good balance to it. You know, it's got enough projectiles on the screen to keep you on your toes. The projectiles are well defined enough via the color palette to go and be mostly dodgeable, you know, for the most part. You know, it's just literally, for the most part, just bad gameplay at this point. You know, like just being bad at the game in general, and strangely enough, I was okay with this. My godson barely played any of this. Like, I was literally hogging this game so hard, you know, that he was like, hey, you know, am I going to be able to play this one? And me being the asshole that I am, like, unintentionally, I was so into it. I was like, yeah, man, just give me a minute, and you can go and play it. And what wound up happening is when I went and filmed it, he saw very little of it. He was literally just sitting there, and he's like, oh, hey, you know, I don't really have much of a spot in this, but the cool thing about it is long after the recording was done, the game was so good that I was like, okay, you know what, we're going to go and we're just going to play the hell out of it. Like, I had another emulation device set up, and we literally just hooked it up to a controller, hooked it up to the main TV, and then just went ahead and just played the hell out of it. Like, it just has peak summer vibes. Essentially, like when you go and you say, hey, it's the 90s, it's the middle of summer, I want to go cool off, get indoors and enjoy myself, maybe grab some soda and play some games, this game definitely feels like that. Like it has like that very summer-esque kind of feel to it, where there's just nothing but raw enjoyment, and it's fast-paced action, and it feels really lovely in that regard. So it has like so much replayability. And I think that a lot of that is attributed to the balance. Like I said, it doesn't feel like too much. It doesn't feel like too little. The upgrades feel really, really good. You know, bosses are really, really nice, although sometimes cheap. You know, patterns are pretty easy to recognize for the most part. They're not too fast. They're not too slow. You know, it's pretty much everything that I would want to see out of an arcade game, which is really, really nice because at their core, arcade games are just there to make money, right? They're there to literally go and be like, hey, we're going to go ahead and just go and make this game as hard as we can so we can try to farm as much cash out of it as we can to maintain viability, which, you know, that's just arcade games in a nutshell. But with this one, I feel like there was like more consideration kind of taken in with it, you know? Like, they took in so much consideration with it that when I go and I actually die, I kind of feel like I made an honest mistake instead of like the game just being cheap for the sake of being cheap. And that's actually kind of hard to achieve in an arcade game, because on one end, you know, you kind of have to have that balance there, because on one end, if it's too easy, the customer beats the game. You get maybe $1.50 out of it, you know, and you just don't really make a lot of money off of it, and you start operating at a loss. But on the other end, if you make it too hard, one of two things happens. Either the player says to hell with it, they give up and they don't bother coming back to the game, or they go and they inject a shit ton of money into it for the sake of beating the game, and then you're more than likely never going to see that again. And so with SNK games, I find that some of them fall into this nice little category of tough but fair. Andro Dunos definitely fits the tough but fair category a fair bit, whereas a lot of SNK's later games that they would make with their shmups and stuff, they're just brutal for the sake of being brutal. You know, and it doesn't really feel like it's a super fun experience with a lot of them. And when you have something that is that brutal, yes, it is gratifying to beat it past a certain point. Like, it's nice to sit there and say, hey, oh, I beat this, and, you know, I can say that I beat it. Feels good, man. But, you know, it just really, like, it kind of leaves, like, a bad taste in your mouth, I think, afterwards. So with Andro Dunos, they kind of, like, it hits all of the right notes and stuff. Like, when you die, you don't really feel like you're being punished excessively or anything. Like, the weapons still feel like they have a good amount of power to them, you know? There's other games that SNK would make where when you die and you lose your upgrades, the weapons are so weak that there really just is no point to even continuing. Because without those upgrades, you're going to be struggle busing the entire time. And when you struggle bus the entire time, naturally you don't progress. And then when you can't progress, obviously you're not making a video out of it. So I think that with Andro Dunos, it hits the sweet spot. You know, it's not too much, it's not too little. And I really wish that SNK would actually go and make more games like that, because it's really, really refreshing. And so the background that we have here is just pretty much peak 80s and 90s science fiction. A lot of shmups back then used this particular setup and palette and stuff. You know, it wasn't entirely unusual to see older shmups be like, you're inside of a monster, you know, and there's flesh all over the walls. Like, flesh walls is definitely a very common thing in the 80s and 90s. I can't really think of too many arcade games that didn't use flesh walls in bio and body horror at certain points and stuff, and I actually kind of like it. It's very nostalgic to me, you know. I'm very biased in this regard when it comes to stuff like this, and then, of course, I like horror-style things in general, and science fiction-y stuff, so in many ways, you know, you wouldn't really be getting a super clear criticism of it, because I'm always going to have that bias towards it, right? So when I go and I started playing this, it kind of felt like I was putting on a nice comfy pair of pants, right? A lot of stuff seemed really familiar. There was like a lot of accommodations. The game was fairly accessible as well with its color palette. And when you have a game like that, you know, you don't really worry about it too much. Like, I didn't really have to think about filming it too much. Most of the time when I go and I do a lot of these filmings, I'm like, okay, we gotta do this, 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 and this. And then when I went to film this one, I was so much in my element that I literally just went and I started going with the flow, essentially. And then I had my fair share of screw-ups as well, because with this one, I had forgotten to literally go and turn on the automatic dip switch for continuing. So as an end result, I'm so into it that I'm just mashing the button down, and as a consequence of this, I almost scrapped the entire run by running the timer down, which, you know, I would have had to obviously restart at that point. And so I was just literally kind of going and getting super into it and stuff, and I definitely loved these R-Type style shmups. You know, I've always loved R-Type style shmups. I'm bad at them. I'm not going to be doing like hitless runs or anything like that, but I do enjoy them. And so you pair up that genre with like the art style and stuff, and then the overall length of the game is actually nice too. It's a little bit under, I want to say 44 minutes. And so I don't feel like I'm getting worn down while doing it. That was when I was going in and shooting a lot of the footage for these games and stuff. One of the main issues that I think that I had actually struggled with was some of these arcade games are long. And I don't mean long as in you take a long journey and it feels like really satisfying. You know, you get to the end, you spent a little under 2 hours going and getting it done, and, you know, it's nice. No, I mean long as in it kind of drags and drags and drags and drags, and then like eventually you get to a point where you're like, hey, this is going on for so long that it's literally no longer fun. And so I think with a lot of arcade games, how much time you spend at the arcade also factors into the fun factor, because you don't really want your game to go and overstay its welcome. And I think that was a lesson that I learned from playing Sega games. Like a lot of Sega's arcade games and stuff that they release, especially House of the Dead, you know, they would be like, hey, we want you to be here about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And, you know, that kind of seemed like the de facto standard time for arcades for a while, you know. And so with SNK, some of their arcade games, like their older ones, and then like one or two of their newer ones, are like a multi-hour commitment and stuff. And I think that it kind of overstays its welcome a little bit in terms of the overall experience. So I've always kind of, looking at arcades, I've always kind of looked at them as like little tiny quick trips, if you would. You know, you go in, somebody's shopping, you pop in the arcade, you know, you have your short little session, and then by the time you're done, everybody's done shopping, everybody wants to go home. You know, and that's what arcades, I think, have always been kind of, for me, thinking about them, is just like little excursions, playing a game that is going to beat your ass, and then you just go home and enjoy the rest of your day, essentially. And so with this game, it doesn't really feel too long or too short. It doesn't really feel, you know, too easy, too hard. You know, it just feels like how it should. It feels like there is a very good balance of everything, and that is really hard to achieve, I think. So I just kind of kept playing it. It became a staple. So I do have it loaded up on the handheld and stuff. But it's one of the games that I enjoyed so much that I actually bothered to load it up onto a TV emulator, essentially, that I would typically use, you know, and I would just go and play the hell out of it on that as well, you know. And the only real discrepancy I think that I had is, since the hardware is largely different, there was other things that I would have to try to compensate for, one of the biggest being input delay. So obviously these older games were built around functioning off of good old CRTs and stuff, and the thing with CRTs that I think a lot of the younger viewers are not going to understand is they didn't have really any input delay. It was pretty much, for the most part, damn near instantaneous. And so when you go and you play a lot of these older games and you're loading it up on, say, like a flat screen, well, flat screens have way more input latency. Now, with my TV that I'm going and shooting all this footage on, the input latency is not that bad. It's only about 6 milliseconds. If I throw it into game mode, it throws it down and tosses it into 4 milliseconds, which is nice. And with other LCD TVs, sometimes the input delay is like as bad as like 22 or 23 milliseconds. And then their game modes would be like, I think, in between 16 to 18 milliseconds. So in terms of things, my TV is actually a little bit better than most. Sony actually does really well with a lot of their panels. You know, they did well with their CRTs, they did well with their flat panels as well. They kind of struggled in the beginning, but now they're actually doing really good. So even though they have a super low latency on their LCDs, I still feel that. So when operating it on an emulator, you can actually do run ahead. And what run ahead allows you to do is it helps mitigate input latency, so your game is a lot more responsive and snappy. You know, and so one of the big things that I kind of struggled with is I'm enjoying the hell out of the game, but you need to have really good response time for shmups like this, which, you know, that's fine. But I found that the big thing that I was actually struggling with is there would be this oddball delay even with game mode enabled, run ahead enabled, and, you know, it just kind of, I feel it kind of sucks it out of the experience, because when you go and you play it at a arcade and stuff, basically all that hardware is right there, and of course it's functioning on a CRT, so real-time movement more or less is damn near instantaneous. So you can go and you can bob and weave and get in between certain things, but I find that one of the problems with emulation is that you can do your best and still have everything set up perfectly, but if you're taking an old game and you're trying to go and adapt it to a modern platform, there are going to be some concessions. One of the biggest being, oh hey, my stuff is a little bit more delayed than normal, and sometimes that can equate to you not being at your best per se. You know, input latency in general is not something that I particularly care for. It's one of the main reasons why I don't really like Bluetooth. You know, like when I go and set up like a console to play it on the TV and stuff with, I try to always use a wired pad because Bluetooth has a pretty good amount of latency with it. Now, you can actually get around it a little bit by going, and for some of these videos I had to use a 2.4 gigahertz wireless controller, and 2.4 gigahertz is ultra low latency. You know, and it does a good job for the most part, but you know, everybody uses Bluetooth these days. It has like a lot of input latency to it, and people kind of struggle with it a little bit. So it was really just kind of shitty because I'm going and enjoying the game, and I'm like, man, this game is so much fun and it's so good, but I honestly feel like there were certain segments where I couldn't really get max enjoyment out of it because it's like there's always this delay. And you know, I tried, I think it was just a problem with the emulation because I would go and I would play other games as well, and to see if it's literally the game or the emulator, and other games would function fine. You know, Run Ahead would work normally, the input delay wouldn't be super bad. But for some reason with Andro Dunos, it just had like this insane amount of delay, and it's like, so I'm enjoying the game, I'm loving making the footage, but I honestly feel like I wasn't playing it as well as I could have because of this really big delay, you know? So I have this perfect game here essentially that I'm going and I'm playing and I'm loving it, and then I'm sitting here going, oh my god, I'm actually enjoying myself, but I can feel that drag essentially, and it's super rough. It really is. And so we had the funny thing about this game is me and my godson sank like 80 hours into it. You know, he was on break from school at the time, and we were going and we were playing it, and we were just sinking it. I was like, alright dude, it's time to go and, you know, do another game and stuff, and because my thumbs would eventually get tired from playing this. Shmups just wear out my thumbs so damn hard. And he just wanted to keep playing it. He's like, it's fun, let's keep going, you know? And so we would go and we would just keep doing it, and it was just so much fun. Now, he didn't really mind the input latency that much, you know? Like, I think he's kind of used to it and stuff because he's never seen, like, a CRT TV. You know, he is young enough that he doesn't even really remember plasmas. Like, I remember for a while plasma TVs were kind of like the gold standard, but the problem with plasmas is the same thing that we have with OLED these days. They burn in. And then on plasma screens, the geometry would eventually start to screw up as well because it was just literally compressed gas still. So it basically had all of the weaknesses and strengths of a CRT TV, but at the same time, it had more issues with it as well, which is why we just don't see plasma screens anymore, and it's why OLED is kind of going through a roughing out period as well. But no, we just kind of sat down and we kept playing it and stuff, and it was just such a good experience, and it was a hell of a way to go and start off his break, and he just had a really good time with it, which for me, that's what all of this is about and stuff. You know, it's cool to go and make videos and stuff, but I think the more important thing for me is just how enjoyable the experience was, you know, and I like having that bonding time with him. So we were supposed to go, and we were getting ready to go and do this video because he's learning video editing too. He enjoys that on the side. And the entire time we were like, you know, we'll go ahead and do it in a minute. Let's go ahead and play some more Andro Dunos. And it was just awful in that regard. Just completely and utterly awful in that regard, but funny as hell on top of it, because there's not too many games that we can say actually got us to go back and play them over and over and over again. It had a very addictive quality to it, to a certain extent, and so it was just really nice. It has things that I loved, it has things that he loves, you know, like he's really digging a lot of these older games, and it's really nice, I think. God, I just love how so much of this is set up and stuff, and it marries like a lot of my favorite things, and I just really wish I could have found more games like this. I really do. So, now that I'm done gushing over this damn game, I was actually going to go and move into commentary about commentary, strangely enough. So, I wanted to actually tackle something that, you know, it's purely an opinion, but I believe that it's an opinion that has a lot of truth to it. The weird thing that I see a lot of the times with people that actually go and do commentaries, essentially, is they'll do like a 5-hour video, and they'll feel that they have to go and keep talking for the entire duration of that video. Like, they can't, a lot of the time I notice they can't have lulls ever anywhere in it. And I always thought that was kind of strange, you know? Like, I've been trying to go and move over to a format where a lot of people are like, well, there isn't commentary throughout the entire video, why are you making commentary videos? And it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's fair. But I think a lot of the time when you go and you look at it and stuff, you kind of sit there and you say to yourself, okay, well, do I really need to do commentary for each and every little aspect of the video? You know, given that the video is done in a raw format that just runs from point A to point B, I feel like there's going to be moments where you just don't have anything to say, where you just kind of let the gameplay speak for itself, and that's pretty much it. I don't really think it's, from my perspective at least, I don't really think that it's actually achievable to literally go and have something to say about every little thing in a game, and I think that's why when you look at a lot of commentary videos, there's a lot of editing, because what'll happen is people will pick and choose what they want to talk about, and then they'll formulate their footage around that, essentially. And they'll be like, okay, well, we are moving into, and then insert X subject here. So, and that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. And how they go and, like, choose to do their videos, it keeps everything very cohesive. But I think as somebody that does, like, a lot of raw cuts and stuff, and a lot of stuff that's just literally off the cuff, I feel like it's not really achievable to just sit there and always have something to talk about. You're going to have moments of silence. And so, you know, part of this realization is just, I think, accepting the fact that there isn't always going to be something to remark about, you know, and I think that kind of upsets a lot of people. You know, they're like, oh, we gotta have footage. And it's like, okay, we have footage. And now we need to say something throughout the entire thing, and it's like, why? You know? So it's something that I've been forced to kind of reckon with, I think, a fair bit, because a lot of people are like, hey, you know, you're going and doing commentary vids, but why do you have, like, these moments where they're blank? And I would have to ask, I'd be like, blank? You know, I'm thinking like I'm having a gap in video. Essentially, I'm getting ready to go and check. And a lot of people were like, no, blank. You know, like, you have entire segments where you don't say anything. Is the audio recording screwed up? Or are you just not saying anything? And a lot of the times I would have to sit there and say, hey, I'm just not saying anything. And people would come back and be like, why? And I would have to reply with, why not? You know, do I have to remark on every little thing that I, you know, see or don't see? Or it's a very interesting topic, I think, and I think that it kind of adds a little bit of pressure to everything. You know, like, commentary videos for me, like, I sit down and I realize the commentary videos are the weak link out of my entire library. However, I do enjoy doing them, and some people do enjoy watching them, so I continue doing them, essentially. But even though they're a weak link and stuff, I don't really feel this, like, really huge need to go and kind of bend to the norm and stuff. Like, I'm still relatively comfortable going and having moments where nothing is said in some segments. You know, and I don't really, I guess, understand why some people get upset about it. It just seems kind of silly to me. And so the way that I like to do my vids is, a lot of the times I just like to comment on whatever the hell is going through my brain at the time, as well as the game itself. You know, I like to talk about what I like and what I don't like about the game, and of course, no script. And sometimes, when you go and you run in that fashion, you just kind of go through dry spells. And I, even sometimes with some of these videos, I go and I don't really have anything to say at the end, so it's like, okay, this is the end of the commentary, we're going to go ahead and cut it here, and then, go from there, do X, Y, Z, whatever. And I'm actually okay with that as well. I always felt it was kind of weird for those that felt like they had to keep talking all the way up until the last bit of the credits rolled, and like, there's not really too much, like when I do commentary and stuff, there's not really too much that I view as mandatory. I always like to always have like an introduction and stuff and be like, hey, we're doing this for X, Y, and Z. Hi, hello, I hope you're doing well. And then I always like to have a slightly warm closing where I can sit there and be like, hey, thank you for coming out. Thank you for giving me your time, your energy, all that jazz. Because I feel like, people that do come out and do view these videos and, they do get to the end of it, I feel like, it's good to say thank you because they're still going and giving you their time and their energy. You know what I mean? Like, people don't have to come out and watch these. And then if they stick to the end, that's just a bonus. Because a lot of people, like, and this is across most videos, a lot of people, if the video is longer than 10 minutes, right, they have a tendency to just stop watching it. So when I was going and looking at analytics and stuff, I found that the average view duration for a lot of these videos that are an hour long is the first 20. And then I have another demographic where the average view duration is the entire video, but they have a tendency to run the entire playlist. So when I go and I look at that particular demographic and stuff, I realize that a lot of these people are probably using these videos for what they were originally intended for, which is to sleep. So, to have something to listen to while you go and you conk out in the background. And so, I do pay attention to this stuff, and, I do pay attention to how long people stick around. And so, like, when we actually get to the end, I like to say thanks. Like, I even if I don't say anything for, like, the 15 minutes leading up to that, even if the commentary is technically done, I still like to say thanks at the end because I do like to show an appreciation for people coming out and giving me their time and their energy, no matter what capacity it's in. And so, I do have some things that every video has to have, like it is mandatory. But as far as commentary goes, I don't always feel like I have to have like a large wealth of something to say. I mean, yes, I could take these videos, cut them down to size and be like, okay, I like this and then have a clip, and then I also like this and then have another clip. I didn't really care for this and then have yet another clip, but I enjoy these long form videos quite a bit and stuff, and so I don't really mind having naked spots where, the gameplay just kind of softly plays in the background because, the commentary, the way that I have it set up, it took some tweaking and tuning, but a lot of people I know when they do commentary videos, they go and they have their commentary and then the game is muted in the background, and then they'll have audio when they go and want to show something off. The game will actually be given audio, so there's this constant fluctuation, I think, in various volume levels in terms of the feed that you're getting. And so with mine, what I wound up doing is I wanted to have the game in the background still, because the audio is very much so a part of the experience for the game. And what I wound up doing is lowering the game audio a substantial amount, and then going and then taking my commentary recordings that I do, putting them on there, and then raising the volume on it, and then tweaking it and tuning it until you can still hear the game in the background if you really want to hear the game, but the commentary takes center stage, essentially. It's the focal point. And so that's pretty much how I've chosen to do it. So even though, I can sit there and stop talking, I can have naked points, there's still game audio playing in the background. So when I eventually and inevitably do stop talking, there's not this oddball, awkward silence that kind of hangs in the background. I've never really cared for that about other commentary videos, where what'll happen is the commentator will literally go, stop talking, and then there will be this very awkward silence in the background while we wait for the game audio to go and catch up. they'll go to demonstrate something, and then they'll be like, okay, check this out, and then it'll be like 7 or 8 seconds of just nothing. Like, no feed whatsoever. And it's very, very awkward, I feel. So in terms of like how we do audio and how it relates to, you know, me stopping talking or not delivering commentary in that moment, I at least like to make sure that there is some background noise on the track in the rear. That way, even if I stop saying something, you can still hear pew pew or boom boom. And I mean, granted, it's not going to be loud and obnoxious like the original cut's going to be, but at least it's not this deafening silence. You know, a deafening silence can be very, very obnoxious sometimes, and I've never really cared for it. You know, so most silent videos I don't really care for too much at all. There has to be like some sort of auxiliary audio in the background and stuff, and I think the only time that I've ever sat there and accepted it, is if somebody's like repairing something in the background, because some of those repair videos, they are like dead silent if they're not saying anything, and that's fine. But I feel that, you know, when it comes to commentary videos and stuff, if I'm going to be going and stopping the commentary at any point, I still want to have that background noise. You know, I still want the viewer to have something that they can listen to passively so they do not get bored. And then it would just be weird to have like a video feed that's running with just this deafening silence in the background, and it would just be one of those oddball things, I think. I love how well designed this last area is. You know, I think the only real gripe I had about trying to emulate arcade on on a handheld was that with the arcade and stuff, I feel that the hardware accommodates it better because you have like a giant meaty joystick to grab onto, and you use your whole hand, right? And it feels really weird because a lot of the time when I do shmups, I'm so used to modern thumbsticks having this entire range of dead zone sensitivity and progressive acceleration that I keep forgetting that arcade sticks were quite literally like 0 to 60. You know, like you just slam it in whatever direction that you want to go, and so I find that when I was going and doing a lot of these shmups and stuff, it was very oddball because I would try to basically micro navigate everything using precision movements to try to go and squeeze in between smaller areas, and so I keep forgetting that with games like this there really are no small adjustments, just really, really big ones, given the nature of the hardware and stuff and how it used to function back in the day. So I literally would go and play this game and stuff, and I think I do okay with it, but I would overcorrect a lot of the time. You know, I'd be like, okay, we're in the center, good enough, you know, and because I wouldn't be able to fine-tune, essentially. And I think that this boss more or less shows that off very well. It's like, okay, we're barely missing stuff because we can't just, you know, squeeze it in there. And I mean, there are drawbacks to emulation and stuff. Sometimes the original hardware still is the best. I mean, it's nice to play these in a mobile capacity, and it's nice to share them and stuff. But sometimes the original hardware still is the best and, you know, should be used. But SNK doesn't service their arcade cabs anymore. They don't really have too many of them walking around, so I suspect at some point, if I really wanted to get a better experience, I would have to go and invest in some sort of fight stick that was wired, and I would have to resort to playing it on the TV. The handheld, it does an okay job with it. Like, the Odin is actually a pretty good device for what it is. It has no issues and stuff, but it doesn't, like, these games are never going to be able to take advantage of the full thumbstick sensitivity and everything else, so I feel like some of the hardware is kind of wasted in that capacity. So on one end, like, the hardware is kind of wasted in some capacities, but on the other end, it's like you don't really feel like you're getting the full experience because the hardware you're using is not quite like the hardware that it used back then, and And then, of course, you know, you have input delay and everything else. I mean, emulation is really nice, but it really, sometimes it does have some really, really nasty caveats. I kind of wish that there would be a hardware revival of sorts. Like, maybe like every 35, 40 years, be like, okay, we're going to do a hardware revival. We're going to, you know, make a limited run of X, Y, and Z just for the express purpose of keeping it alive. I think I would really, you know, appreciate that and stuff. I mean, we see it with consoles with, you know, the Genesis Mini and everything else, and, you know, the throwback consoles and stuff, but, you know, you don't really ever see any sort of company go out of their way to keep arcade hardware alive anymore. Like, I honestly think that the internet and home consoles did a pretty good job of killing off arcades and stuff, because people don't have to leave the house anymore to play a game, like a high-end game. They can just stay at home and do their thing. And of course, there's always PC gaming on top of it. And I think I would really love to see them bring arcade hardware back in a public fashion, where they're just kind of sitting there and, like, hey, you know, we're bringing back SNK for a limited run. And I think it would be really lovely to see. But that's just wishful thinking, I believe. So with that thought in mind, that pretty much wraps up this commentary and stuff. We got the rest of the goddamn boss fight here while I sit here and fight this friggin' mutant fetus. Well, fetus cluster of cells, do we know what it is? Hell no. So for all those that came out and stuff and, you know, gave me their time and energy as usual, I wanted to say thank you. I appreciate what you guys do. I appreciate you guys stopping in. And even if you guys choose to not say anything, I still appreciate you guys stopping by regardless. I have more commentary videos coming up. They've been kind of being rendered out at a pretty even pace, and I suspect that I'll be done with the entire playlist soon. So I look forward to wrapping that up. I hope you guys had your, well, what the hell? Oh, jeez. Speaking of going off the rails, that moment where you have like a real quick blip in the hardware. Anyways, as I was saying, I hope you guys actually had a really good day. I hope everything's going really well for you. I hope you're being treated well. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.